What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Blood on the Razor Wire TV, where we bring it to you real and we bring it to you raw. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, share the video, and make sure you leave a comment. So from the beginning of the thumbnail, top 5 brutal gangs in federal prison. A lot of people have asked me about different gangs in prison, what I thought about them. Some people have asked me, Chad, who you think the top most dangerous gang is in a federal penitentiary? And some of you probably heard some of the interviews that I've done with the DWB dude, with Coach George. And, you know, I've mentioned that I felt, in my perspective, that the Sureños, the Mexican Mafia, with the Sureños as their counterparts, are the most dangerous gang in federal prison. And some people might take the word brutal and say, oh, that's an offensive word. But I don't mean it in an offensive way. I mean it in a way where, in a dog-eat-dog world where only the strong survive in federal prison, these are the gangs that get busy. These are the gangs that tolerate no nonsense. These are the gangs that, unfortunately, in this world, will do whatever it takes to finish you, to take you out. So we're going to do some reading about different gangs so you get an understanding of who they are, how they started. I'm going to show you some pictures. And I have some pictures that are just so brutal that I can't put them on YouTube. Pictures of one guy that was stabbed over 70 times. And unfortunately for him, his blood was left on that razor wire. But if you hit me up on Facebook, you can see them photos. Hit me up, man, Instagram, whatever. If you want to see the photos that I can't show on YouTube, I'll shoot them to you. So who is the most dangerous gang in prison? The most brutal? The toughest of the tough? To me, it was definitely the Mexican Mafia. You know, I had been in different prisons with these guys. I was in Big Sandy, where, you know, these guys pretty much, man, did what they had to do. Handled their business, played no games. I was also in USP Lee when, you know, one of their big homies got there, Fox. And I seen how he operated. And I seen how the administration respected him. So let's talk a little bit about the Mexican Mafia, also known as La M, Spanish for M. It is a highly organized Mexican-American criminal organization in the United States. Despite its name, the Mexican Mafia did not originate in Mexico and is entirely a U.S. criminal prison organization. Law enforcement officials report that the Mexican Mafia is the deadliest and most powerful gang within the California prison system, and possibly all of the West Coast. I pretty much agree with that. And in federal prison, my perspective is they are the most powerful gang in federal prison. Some other gangs might not want to hear that, but, you know, in the prisons that I've been in, Big Sandy, USP Lee, this was, you know, the most powerful gang. And they were the most powerful gang for a lot of reasons. Like I said, they handled their business. They played no games. For those of you who read my book, you read about Noki, how they attacked Noki because he had a drug debt. He was a heroin addict. And these dudes played no games, man. They handled their business. You know, within the first week I was there, one of their members did something disrespectful, and he was actually Guatemalan, creeper. And I mean, they just punished this dude, man. Stabbed him, beat him. They punished him. Government officials state that there are currently 400 to 500 official members of the Mexican Mafia, with around 1,000 associates who also carry out its illegal activities in the hopes of becoming full members. Law enforcement believes that La M presently is not presided over by a single leader. Many Mexican Mafia members have the authority to order murders and oversee various other criminal activities. They have almost 1,000 associates that help carry out those orders and have the theoretical control of all Sureño gang members. Members are expected to engage in tests of their loyalty to La M, which may include theft or murder. The penalty for refusing orders or failing to complete an assigned task is often death. According to the gang's constitution, members may also be punished or murdered if they commit any of 4 major infractions. These include becoming an informant, acts of homosexuality, acts of cowardice, and showing disrespect against fellow gang members. According to gang policy, a member of the Mexican Mafia may not be murdered without prior approval by a vote of 3 members. Yet the murder of non-members requires no formal approval. I mean, that kind of tells you a lot about who they are, right? Definitely a dangerous group of men. People that refuse to be disrespected. People that demand respect. And when I talk about demanding respect, I'm going to tell you what happened when the Sureños and the Sureños and the Mexican Mafia got the USP Lee. They had put all these dudes in the hole, and they had transferred Fox from Big Sandy over to Lee County, USP Lee. And they kept him in the hole for about 2 weeks. And they released Fox and like 4 of his dudes. And they said every 2 to 3 days, we're going to start releasing your guys. But first, the warden wanted him to know where he wanted tables at in the kitchen. And he told him, I want a table here and I want a table here. And then they asked him, where do you want a table at in the yard? And I had already been in prison for quite a few years at this point when these dudes came over there. They came out to the yard and put tables in for these dudes. They wanted no problems. They respected the Mexican Mafia. Never in the whole time that I had been in prison would I have ever seen anything like that, where the administration would go and say, hey, what do you want? What do you need? Was it respect or was it fear by the administration, by the Federal Bureau of Prisons? I think it was both. I think it was, hey, we don't want no issues, so let's do whatever we can for these cats. You know, and I remember one time when I was in the hole, all of them dudes were in the hole. I remember this black kid, Jamaican kid. He had asked one of the Serenos that was in the cage. We were all in the rec cage. He had asked one of the Serenos, hey, brother, use the word brother, can you pass this kite down 5 cages for me? And Fox was in the rec cage with the Sereno. The Sereno dude said, look, let me tell you something, homeboy. He said, I'm not your brother. He said, but out of respect, I'm going to pass the kite for you. But don't call me brother ever again. And I was like, wow. Like, this is the stuff that you see in movies, right? This is the stuff that you heard about. This is the stuff that I lived in. The things that I experienced. Sadly. And, you know, like I said, I was friends with a lot of the Serenos, man. I got a dude from 18th Street, man. I'm real close with, trying to help him get out of prison. You know, he painted the paintings for me, did a bunch of the tattoos on my back. We were in Big Sandy together in the same unit. Years later, I seen him in Raybrook, and you know what, man? We became really close. And here, I'm going to read you something else that happened at an FCI. Because some people think that federal prison is camp fed. They think when you leave a USP and you go to an FCI, things get better, which they do. They do to a certain extent. But they're still dangerous. They're still violent. Denver, 4 inmates who were housed at the Federal Correctional Institution in Florence, Colorado, were found guilty by a jury yesterday of conspiracy and second-degree murder, U.S. Attorney John Welsh and FBI Special Agent in Charge James Yocon announced. The 3-week trial was heard before U.S. District Court Judge John L. Kane. The jury deliberated for a few hours before reaching their guilty verdicts. The murder took place on December 29, 2008. One defendant, Jose Augustin Pluma, was charged by criminal complaint on April 8, 2009. In addition to Pluma, 4 other defendants were added to an indictment returned by a federal grand jury on July 7, 2009. On October 7, 2009, prosecutors obtained a superseding indictment charging 5 defendants. The jury trial began on May 13th for 4 of the defendants, ending on June 14th. The trial of the 5th defendant is scheduled for later this year. These dudes were all convicted of beating this dude in their unit, right? For disrespect or for trying to take over. This was in FCI Florence. You know where the ADX is at? This was at the medium security prison on that complex. On December 28, 2008, Hernandez, a Sereno leader, met with 2 inmates, unnamed co-conspirators, ordering them to physically assault Zuniga Garcia in the Pablo Bravo housing unit. Hernandez told the 2 unnamed co-conspirators to expect additional assailants to participate in the attack. On December 29, 2008, Roseles, a lieutenant of Hernandez, met with another inmate in the Pablo B housing unit. He asked that inmate to act as a lookout during the assault. He also instructed that inmate to ensure that the victim not escape from Pablo B housing unit once the attack commenced. So they went in the cell and they beat this kid, right? Rules and another unnamed co-conspirator took their places as lookouts. Pluma and the 2 others assaulted the victim by striking him in the head and body with their hands, feet, and weapons, including padlocks attached to belts. Zuniga Garcia suffered serious head injuries and died as a result of the assault. These guilty verdicts show that despite being in prison, if you kill someone while incarcerated or assist in that killing in any way, you'll be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, said U.S. Attorney John Walsh. Acts of violence, vicious violence, man. Dudes in the cell gets beat to death. Some people think, hey, man, when you jump on a guy, you beat him. You just beat him, the cops come, and he's gone. It's over. It's all over with. It's not always the case, man. Sometimes you beat someone and you didn't go into the situation thinking, hey, we're going to kill this guy. And I read a bunch of the statements in this case and police reports before I did this video. And these dudes were like, yeah, man, we didn't go into expecting to kill him. But now we went to trial for killing the dude, and we got 480 months. For those of you that don't know, 480 months is 40 years. You're in an FCI, and you got 40 years now. I think one of them was sentenced to life, or two of them were sentenced to life. Started out with a little bid, 7, 8, 9 years. I mean, I shouldn't say 7, 8, or 9 years is a little bid. But you had a chance to go home, man, at an age where you could do something positive with your life. And what did they do? They fucked it off, man. Their whole lives are fucked off. Gone. Forever gone. They're going to spend the rest of their lives in a maximum security federal prison. And that's where it'll probably end. How old were these dudes? 30 years old? 35 years old? 40 years? Get out when you're 68, 69? You tell me about their lives, because I don't know. Vicious gangs, brutal. People that will do things that other people don't want to do, right? Gangs that will definitely take care of business. I found this article. Federal jurors considering the first homicide at the nation's highest security prison were told Tuesday about a gang leader feud that resulted in a vicious prison yard beating. Prosecutors and defense attorneys presenting opening statements Tuesday in the first-degree murder case against Silvestre Chicali Rivera, who was accused of fatally stomping and beating Mexican Mafia prison gang leader Manuel Tati Torres, 64, on April 21st, 2005. So it was a long time ago, but think about it, man. This man was 64 years old, Mexican Mafia, beat to death. Rivera and accomplice Richard Chuco Santiago are accused of killing Torres in a cage exercise yard at Administrative Maximum U.S. Penitentiary, or ADX, in Florence. In her opening, prosecutor Valeria Spencer immediately showed jurors video of the assault, in which Rivera and Santiago, a shot caller from the prison gang, beat him without retaliation for several minutes. You can see Mr. Santiago and Mr. Rivera pummeling Mr. Torres, Spencer said. The deed is done, but not all the way. They step out and they go back in. They step out and go back in. Santiago returns alone and delivers 7 kicks to the head and 1 to the chest as Torres lies unmoving on the concrete ground. Torres, who was ill, had 18 broken ribs and a cracked skull. 18 broken ribs. His eyes were swollen shut and his left ear was so swollen that it didn't appear to be an ear, Spencer said. A photograph taken in prison showed a bald-headed Rivera emblazoned with gang tattoos on his bare chest and a mustache, swooping down his chin from the corners of his mouth. He had that little brush, huh? But I mean, this just gives you a glimpse into why I say these guys are the most dangerous, the most brutal. There's a reason why. Because when it comes time, unfortunately, in prison to handle what we call handling business, these guys handle it, man. If the big homie tells them to do something, they're going to do it. I promise you that. And pretty much, man, it's kind of like a weapons policy, man. They're coming for real. They're not playing games. They're not just coming to beat you up, man. They're coming to finish you. I mean that. You know, I seen another incident at Big Sandy where there was this kid from New York. They called him Little Will. And there was an issue with him, and he was a Puerto Rican dude from New York. He had an issue with one of the big homies over a debt. And he sent them boys on him, man. They stabbed this kid 40 or 50 times. I don't even know how he didn't die. He lived. And I can't tell you how he lived, but he lived. But imagine that, getting stabbed 40 or 50 times. Imagine getting kicked in the head until they can't even recognize what your ear looks like. Number 2 on my list. Some people might not agree with this because you've probably been fed that the Aryan Brotherhood is the toughest gang and all of that type of stuff. Maybe in California, maybe in the West Coast. But in the prisons that I've been in, they weren't the most brutal. They weren't the most dangerous, not to me. Instead, it was SAC, Soldiers of Aryan Culture. And honestly, I had met a kid in pretrial that was from my area. He was part of SAC, Soldiers of Aryan Culture. Me and him were really close. We ate together. We hung out together. And eventually, when I go to federal prison, he's already there. I show up at Big Sandy, and who do I run into? This kid from my area, the SAC member. And he had a really close homeboy named Joe. And I got to know these cats, man. And I got to look at them and learn some of their ideology, man. Learn some of the things that they thought. Learn some of the things that they believed. And I was able to, from an intelligence standpoint, say, Chad, look at these dudes, man. Look what they believe in. Look who they are. Look how warped some of their minds are, how they think. Like the kid Joe told me, like he didn't even care about life, man. He was going home, but he didn't care. He was pissed off that Obama had become the president, that he was running for president. And I remember him writing me a kite and saying, man, look at our country, bro. Look what happened. And just blew it off. Like blew off life. Said, dude, I don't even want to go home. Let's learn a little bit about SAC. And then I'm going to show you some photos. Show you some photos as we read. American prisoner Tracy David Tin Man Sweeney founded the Soldiers of Aryan Culture in 1997. According to Tracy Sweeney's brother Steve, Tracy had been influenced to establish a white power group after an Aryan Brotherhood affiliate introduced him to white supremacist literature sometime in the mid to late 1990s. Prior to that, Steve Sweeney alleges that his brother was a non-racist who was once a part of a multiracial street gang and an avid fan of hip-hop music. The SAC has grown since its initial founding, making its way across the United States. Prior to his sentencing, Tracy Sweeney admitted that he started SAC in 1997 and oversaw the gang's operations, including drug dealing and orchestrated attacks upon prison guards. Under his leadership, SAC members rose through the ranks by committing violence against Hispanic and black inmates chosen at random. A career criminal from Utah named Victor Bucci has firsthand knowledge about the founders of the Soldiers of Aryan Culture. In October of 2007 at the Federal Medical Center in Butner, North Carolina, Bucci told Guerrilla Convict, check out Guerrilla Convict also, Seth Ferrante, phenomenal writer, that Tracy Sweeney and his younger brother Steve Sweeney, a.k.a. Taz, grew up in the suburbs of Ogden, Utah. Think about that for a minute. White kids from the suburbs of Utah. They were like a lot of kids in the area. They got high, listened to a lot of rap, and committed petty crimes. They were also in multiracial street gangs, said Bucci. They weren't racists at all. Tracy Sweeney's racial awakening occurred inside the Utah State prison system. According to Bucci, Tracy hooked up with an older white guy from California who had ties to the Aryan Brotherhood. I forgot dude's name, Sweeney said, but he gave Tin Man a bunch of white supremacy literature, and he got hooked. Also worth noting, Bucci said, is that during that same time, a gang called the Soldiers of Aryan Warriors were really starting to rise. The next thing I know, we get locked down for a while, and we come off, Tin Man had created his own gang. It was kind of weird because they did ride with Saul, but they were their own thing as well, and they grew fast. SAC first gained notoriety in early 2002 after police officers in Ogden claimed that members of SAC had intended to use pipe bombs to attack Jewish athletes at the 2002 Winter Olympics. After that happened, said Bucci, the feds were all over them. The rest, I guess, you can say, is history. Chris Gentry joined SAC in 2013, a native of Indiana. He's never been to the state of Utah, nor has he even met any of his gang's original founders. I patched up with SAC because I like what they stand for, he told Guerrilla Convict, serving 12 years for methamphetamine conspiracy. We caught up with Chris on the 10th of September inside a federal prison in the central region of the United States. We're about racial pride. While schools and the media teach our youth that white people should be ashamed of our history, we take our learned knowledge and teach young people that they should be proud of the accomplishments that our race has done for the world. Our ancestors are the ones who built the world around us, that same world that is being ripped apart by degenerate races of lazy, whining rapists. While the muds destroy everything we built, the mainstream media stays in ignoring or just not speaking the truth about real racial issues, and instead highlights anything that the white man does wrong. Anything that rattles the cages and makes muds hate the man, that's what our mainstream media does. Although Chris refuses to talk about any details surrounding SAC's orientation requirements, reports state new members have to complete a 6 to 12-month period of criminal missions. Often these orders include hits like stabbings on other inmates. Once the mission is complete and the member is approved, they receive a SAC patch, a tattoo of an iron cross wrapped by a swastika. All members are required to read white supremacist literature and attack anyone who threatens their ideology, the report says. So, that's SAC, right? And let's talk a little bit about a dude that I've consistently talked to you guys about, Ricky Fackrell. You can see pictures of Ricky, man, when he was younger. And you see him start to evolve. He looks like a man. He goes from being this young kid that goes to prison, maybe somewhat like the founders, right? And then he becomes this violent dude. Some people call him an animal. He becomes this viciously violent dude. And eventually he kills this gang member, right? One of his brothers who's violated policy, who's drinking, using drugs, in debt. They kill the dude, man. They stab him over 70 times. All those little holes that you see are not tattoos. their stab wounds. They take his life. And he's yelling at him, man, that's enough, man. I've had enough. And I highlight Ricky because there's a lot of young dudes that are probably watching this show. Think about Ricky Fackrell, man. Think about the fact that he came to prison and now, without a shadow of a doubt, he's going to die in prison. They're going to strap him to a table. They're going to walk him down a range and they're going to put him on this table. And they're going to inject a poison into his veins. And he's going to take his last breath. Then they're going to put him in a body bag. And they're going to carry him out of the prison. The same way that 2 of his victims were carried out of the prison. And I don't say this in a bad way. I want you to grasp this, man. That you can look at this kid and see that he was just a young kid. And you can see what he evolved into. He lived, like the brother said the other day about the DMI, Dead Men Incorporated, One-Eyed Mark. He said, this was my religion, man. This is what I lived. I lived this religion, man. Filled of hate and violence and anger. That's who Ricky Fackrell became. But make no mistake, sometimes we can't always speak for people, but I'll bet you that there are plenty of lonely nights. That he's in that cell all alone and he contemplates his life. He looks in the mirror and might think about how he was when he was just a young kid. And then he's looking in the mirror and the face that's staring back at him. He probably doesn't like it. He probably doesn't like the fact that he knows that there's going to be an execution date. It's going to be his execution. He probably thinks about the things that he missed out in life. Perhaps it's kids. Perhaps it's a son to throw a football to. Or perhaps it's a woman. Or a wife. Maybe he thinks about the jobs that he could have had. The things that he could have done with his life. But instead he went to prison. Read some of this literature, got introduced to the gang life, and he lived it. And you know, the one thing that I see, and we can even talk about Troy Kell, right? You watch some of Troy Kell's later interviews. I think Troy Kell gives it to you real, man. He gives it to you raw. He regrets what he did with his life. You know, he fucked his whole life off. He used that term too. Ricky fucked his whole life off. His partner Kramer fucked his whole life off. For a gang, man. For something that they felt they believed in. Maybe they still believe in it. Maybe that's all they got left. They can only grasp that and say, I did this for my gang, for what I believed in. I did this for my race. I did this for this, or I did this for that. Because they know they're going to die. And it's sad, man. It's a sad reality. It's a sad reality that, you know, a couple people died in prison on their hands. A couple people died and families had to be told, and now they're going to die. They're going to die. The government's going to take their life, man. Kind of like the Old Testament, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. These SAC dudes played no games. I talked a little bit about Joe. And Joe and another kid from ARM, Aryan Resistance Militia, another gang that gets busy in prison, white gang. Him and this other kid, Danny, they stabbed a kid in Big Sandy. I remember Joe laughing about it and telling me in the hole, man, it went in just like butter, bro. Like, it's just like the way that he told me, it was like, wow, man. And you know, sometimes in prison, man, you got to play the game, man. So I played the game. But my intelligence wouldn't let me go down a different road. It made me look at these dudes and think about, man, what the hell is this dude really talking about? Look at his life. And I liked Joe, man. I thought Joe was a good dude. And I knew that Joe would throw his life away. For what? He couldn't grasp, man. It's okay to believe in something, man. But should you throw your whole life away for a gang, for a prison gang? Does the prison gang send you commissary money? Does the prison gang give you a hug, man, when you're feeling lonely? Does the prison gang open the cell door and let you out of prison? No, man. It's a road you don't want to be on, man. It's a choice you don't want to make. You just don't want to do it, man. Believe me, for the moment you might want to do it, but in the long run, you don't want to be like Ricky Fackrell, do you? You don't want to be sitting in a prison cell wishing that this wasn't the end of your life. Right? crazy, man. Look at all them stab wounds in that picture. Think about that, man. Think about what that's like. Think about what it's like to be trapped in a cell and you're telling your homeboys that are part of your gang, man, I'm sorry, I fucked up, man. But it's enough. You stabbed me enough. And he didn't die right away from the stab wounds, man. This kid tried to get out of the cell after Kramer and Fackrell left the cell. What happened? Kramer went back in, man. The Shotcaller. He jumped on the kid's head, man. He ended his life. He died. What do you think that dude was thinking about when he was getting stabbed? Oh, man, it's enough. Do you think he was like, damn, man, I'm going to die, man. This is it. That shit happens in prison, man. And that's what you should be thinking about, man, when you're in the street. Think about it, man. Look at those pictures, man. This ain't about scaring you from going to prison. It's about giving you what's real and what's raw, man. That this could be you in that cell. Don't matter what color you are. Don't matter what gang you're in. This shit could happen to you, man. There's vicious, vicious people, man, all over the place. Another gang that I think played no games. And I was actually cool with a couple of these cats. Ran into them. I seen them get busy. The Texas Syndicate, man. Like, these dudes go hard, man. These dudes go hard. The Texas Syndicate includes its leadership, memberships, and associates. Constitutes an enterprise defined by Title 18 U.S. Code Section 1961. That is a group of individuals associated in fact. The enterprise constitutes an ongoing organization whose members function as a continuing unit for common purpose of achieving the objectives of the enterprise. They will bottle you up in the feds, man. You're part of a gang or criminal organization, they will take your ass to court, man. And they will throw away the key. That could be your neighborhood gang, man. It could be the Bloods. It could be the Crips. It could be the Dirty White Boy gang. It could be the Texas Syndicate. The Texas Syndicate originated in the early 1970s in the California prison system as a response to other prison gangs that were preying on native Texas inmates. These Texas offenders banded together for protection purposes and became known as one of the most feared prison gangs within the California prison system. After being released from California prisons, these inmates returned to Texas, often returning to violence and re-entering the prison system. As a result, members were able to expand their control throughout the Texas Department of Criminal Justice prison system. Since the late 1970s, the TDCJ has seen a gradual increase in TS-related activities within the system, and the Texas Syndicate remains one of the main security threats within the Texas Department of Correctional and Justice. TS rules are strictly enforced, primarily resulting in violent attacks on and executions of TS members who violate their rules. Furthermore, that degree of control is carried to communities in which TS members reside. Once out of prison, many TS members continue to commit violent offenses, narcotic-related offenses, and other illegal activities in the area of the country where the members are living and associated with each other. The gang is commonly referred to as Sindicato, Tijuana, SAT, Twisted Sister, Teresa Sanchez, and Cuernos. TS membership is comprised predominantly of Texas-born Mexican-American males and operates under a formal paramilitary organizational structure with a constitution and strict established rules. The Texas Syndicate members frequently refer to each other as carnal, brother, and maintain a distinct identity by establishing and enforcing specific TS rules, holding meetings, utilizing TS gang signs, horns, and by maintaining a close relationship with fellow gang members and their associates throughout the state. Some but not all TS members have TS tattoos. These tattoos commonly include horns and words containing the letters T and S. Like I said, man, I was with these cats, man. I was on a bus to USP Pollock with some of them. And when we got there, there were these two Pisces in a cell. And they didn't really say who they were or who they rode with, but the heavy-set kid came out and the cuffs came off. He came right out of the cell. And he pretty much told the cops, like, hey, I can't go in there, man. I'm a Paisa, man. All them dudes in there are TSs. And the old man that was sitting with the heavy-set kid, the younger kid, the TS dudes were like, yo, man, you were sitting with dude, man. Who you run with, fool? And I remember this. The dude stood up. Old man, I'm in the cell with these cats. And the old man said, Paisa! And these dudes just destroyed this dude, man. Like he was an old man. And he was in there trying to fight, man. It didn't last long. Cops ran in there, separated it. But the old man was pretty beat up, man. Within 2 minutes. I'm talking about viciously beat up. They hit the deuces. They run in there. These dudes don't play games, man. They get busy. I was also with them in USP Lee, and they had kept these dudes in the hole, man, for like a year. And finally, they had to release them, but they couldn't release them on the yard because it was really a paisa yard, right? Bunch of paisas. So they locked us down, let them dudes out. So they were letting them out, built them up, made them think they were getting out. They let them out for like 2 hours. I believe it was either on Thanksgiving or Christmas. They were outside, they were playing basketball, and then they locked them back up in the hole. And these dudes weren't having it, man. They got busy. They went to the rec cages the next day, and they fought the cops, man, for, I don't know, man, a good 14, 15 hours. They climbed the cages. They were fighting. They were throwing shit. They're in there shooting bombs. But these dudes definitely handled their business, man. Are they brutal? They are. They handle their business. But the one thing that people should think about when I talk about these gangs and them handling their business, the TS fighting, the paisas and paisas fighting the TS, or the SAC dudes, killing their own, or fighting this other white gang, or beefing with the DWBs, or the Bloods fighting the Crips, or the Norteños fighting the Serranos. The one thing they should be thinking about is what I always say, man. Together we can conquer as one will fail. We forget the mission, man. It's not the mission no more. The mission is, hey, man, let's fight each other. But really the mission should be, man, about change. About bettering our conditions, bettering us as people, man. Education, getting out of prison and being real fathers, real leaders, real men. But instead, we fight each other, man. We fight each other. We commit vicious violence on each other. And I could say that. I'm white, man. White dudes commit vicious violence on other white dudes in prison like you wouldn't believe, man. It's unbelievable. MS-13. Everybody knows about MS-13, right? They're definitely on my list, man. And I've been with a bunch of these dudes, man, in different prisons. And I remember one dude, man, from MS-13. I was with him actually in an immigration facility. They used to house us in these immigration facilities when I first got arrested. It was a new phenomenon to arrest every crack dealer in the street and send them to federal prison. And they had nowhere to put us. So the U.S. Marshals would contract beds at the immigration facility, and that's where they would house us. And I never knew anything about MS-13. I met this dude. He was from El Salvador. And I remember him going in the thing, man, and taking food out of the trays people ate. He would just dump all the food on a plate, man. And he'd eat the food that other people, had ate off of and put in the cart to go back to the kitchen. We used to eat in the unit. And after everyone put their trays back, he'd take all the food. And I started talking to him like, yo, what's up, man? Why do you eat that food? He had broken English. He's like, man, in my country, you'd be surprised. And then I seen the MS tattoos on him when he was working out. Started talking. He started telling me about MS-13. I was just like, damn, bro. And this dude took no shit from nobody, man. Argued with the cops. Was ready whenever. I seen him end up getting in a fight, man, with a black dude over the pull-up bar. And for real, man, he put in that work, man. He was kicking the dude, jumping on him. They ended up breaking up the fight. But that was my introduction to MS-13. Then when I got to Big Sandy, the MS dudes kind of ran with the Serranos and under the Mexican Mafia. Always, man, ready for violence. Always ready to get busy. Played no games. And then later on, I would end up in Raybrook. With one of the dudes that I was actually at Big Sandy with. He had 60 years. Caught a case, I believe it was out of either Baltimore or New York. I tried to help him out with a clemency petition. Really good dude, man. He started going to church. He was just a really good kid, man. But he had 60 years. And it was killing him inside. He had a beautiful girlfriend that he had met on the pen pal site. And he was like, Chad, man, I just want to go home, bro. I just want to be with my family, man. He said, even if they gave me 30 years. I'm like, wow, man. Even if they gave you 30 years. Can you imagine saying that? Even if they gave me 30 years, at least I would be able to get out. And he's like, man, I got 16 in. I could get out. And I was in a unit with this kid named Sniper. And Sniper was talking about how he was going to get deported, right? He was a tattoo artist. Really good tattoo artist, man. And he's like, look, man, he used to call me Shad. Shad. He couldn't say Chad. He'd call me Shad. He said, Shad, I go back to my country. They're going to kill me, man. He didn't really want to even go home. He didn't want to be deported. He didn't want to get out of jail. He told me that he'd rather be in prison than get deported. He said, because when he gets to the airport, and he said the American government knew this, that the police will take you behind the airport. If no one comes to pick you up, they'll take you behind the airport and shoot you in the head. Just kill you, man. I was with a bunch of them kids that got arrested in Maryland. They were soccer players, man. They had their own MS soccer team. Then they ended up with a soccer team where they linked up with the Serranos. And for real, man, a large majority of them dudes came across as really good dudes. But they also came across as dudes that were like, yo, we will get busy. We'll do whatever it takes, man. And like I said, I was friends with a couple of them, man. Got some insight, talked to them, asked them some questions, wanted to learn a little bit. Let's read a little bit, right? Many MS-13 members were deported to El Salvador after the close of the Salvadorian Civil War in 1992, or upon being arrested, facilitating the spread of the gang to Central America. The gang is currently active in many parts of the continental United States, Canada, Mexico, and Central America. Most members are Central American, Salvadorians in particular. As an international gang, its history is closely tied to United States-El Salvador relations. In 2018, the gang's U.S. membership of up to 10,000 accounted for less than 1% of the 1.4 million gang members in the United States, and a similar share of gang members. The gang is often referenced by the United States Republican Party to advocate for stricter immigration policies. We all see that with Trump, right? In the very beginning, MS-13 was a group of young delinquent heavy metal fans who lived in Los Angeles. However, the undocumented community in Los Angeles was subject to severe racial prejudice and persecution. Under these conditions, MS-13 began to mutate into a gang. Originally, the gang's main purpose was to protect Salvadorian immigrants from the other, more established gangs of Los Angeles, who were predominantly composed of Mexicans, Asians, and African Americans. Some of the original members of MS-13 adhered to Satanism, and while the majority of contemporary MS-13 members do not identify as Satanists, the Satanist influence is still seen in some of their symbolism. I was with another kid that was in Ray Brook. He had worked his way down, and he had caught his case in New York City. And he was a good little dude, man. Used to make pots and all kinds of stuff in the little ceramic class. I tried to help him, man. And he asked me, I didn't know this kid had a life sentence. You would have never, ever expected this kid to have life. And he came to me like, hey, man, can you help me out with my appeal? They denied my COA, certificate of appealability. So I said, yeah, man, let me see it, man. Let me look. And I'm reading it, and I'm like, wow, man. And I want you to know this, man, because if you're a young man, this is what I want you to know. This man was offered 30 years, plea offer, and he refused it. And I know when you're 17 or 18, you can't see 30 years. 30 years is distant. It's far away. It's not something you can comprehend. And he couldn't comprehend it. And he ended up going to trial. What was his crime? Him and his homies went out for a ride. They seen a black dude. They thought he was someone else from a different gang. They thought he was a blood. And they shot him. They shot him in New York City and they killed him. Turns out this kid wasn't a blood. He wasn't a gang member. He was a dude walking home from work, man. And they killed him. They shot him to death. And now, the rest of his life is going to be spent in federal prison. Tried to help him with his appeals, things like that. It was a no-win situation. And really, I helped him, man, to try to give him a little bit of hope, man. Kid, like I said, you would never know that's what he was in prison for. But he fucked his whole life off as a teenager. He took it, he balled it up, and he shot it, man. He shot it into the wastebasket. And I can tell you that every day that he was in prison, he regretted it. He used to tell me, damn, Chad, man, I wish I'd have took that 30 years, man. But back then, man, 30 years, it seemed like it was the rest of my life. But if I'd have got 30, I'd have got out in 25, man. Now I'm going to die in here, huh? He used to ask me, I'm going to die in here, huh, Chad? I tried to give him hope, man. So one guy where I was just kind of was passive. I said, hey, man, the laws are changing. You got to keep fighting. You can't give up. And that's not to say that I approved of his crime, because I didn't. But it bothers me, man, when young kids make irrational, irresponsible choices. And two people die. One dies and goes in a coffin. The other one dies by incarceration. Death by incarceration, man. And if you're watching this video, I don't want to see you end up in prison. Death by incarceration. The last gang that I say is brutal, and you guys heard me say it time and time again, in federal prison. We're not talking about West Coast prisons. We're not talking about California prisons. We're talking about federal prison. Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. You guys all heard my stories about Dinky. Brutal. These guys were brutal, man. They would do bad things to people for no reason, man. Straight up. Straight up. Founded in the early 1980s, the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas, also known as the ABT, the Tip and Ace Deuce, is an unrelated knockoff of the racist prison gang Aryan Brotherhood. It is one of the deadliest prison gangs in the Texas Department of Prisons and also a statewide crime syndicate. Like the Aryan Brotherhood, the ABT has a strict hierarchical leadership structure and has members both inside the state's prisons and on the streets. The gang follows the late terrorist David Lane's 14 words, a white supremacist motto: we must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children. Unlike many other more flamboyant racist prison gangs, members of the ABT pride themselves on being anonymous and their ability to blend in the general population as suburban gangsters on the outside. Man, in the 1970s, under the direction of the Texas Department of Corrections, Chief George Beto, Texas Prisons used a brutal trustee system in which correctional officers used certain inmates known as building tenders to carry out physical punishments of other inmates. Wow. That's something else they did in the feds, man. We're going to do a video about it. Where the police wanted you to police your own. They didn't want to deal with the problems. One of your guys did something wrong, beat the shit out of them. One of them did something wrong, stab them. One of them did something wrong, kill them. You guys handle it. The officers favored white inmates as their tenders, and these men had nearly total control behind the walls. But that system was finally abolished in 1980 as a result of the federal court case of Ruiz versus Estelle, and inmates began to organize along racial lines to fill the power void. White inmates who were a minority in the prison system were particularly angry after being stripped of their power. And in 1981, a group of them decided to form a prison gang along racial lines. The group included ABT co-founder Bobby Adams. He reached out to the Aryan Brotherhood in California, which was already the nation's most formidable white prison gang, and asked if they could form a Texas affiliate. But they were refused. In the end, the inmates, some of them already belonging to other small gangs, came together as the ABT. The ABT quickly rose to become one of the deadliest prison gangs in Texas, responsible for scores of murders over the years. They aimed to restore white power within prison walls and consider themselves to be new building tenders. They waged war against two rival black Texas prison gangs, the Mandingo Warriors and a self-defense family. Like other white prison gangs, including the Aryan Brotherhood, the ABT has a clearly white supremacist, if somewhat muddled ideology. But it is an ideology that comes second to financial considerations, with members working with non-white criminals or non-white prison gangs if it will be profitable for them to do so. As of 2012, the ABT had an estimated 2,600 members in Texas prisons and another 180 in federal prisons across the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, according to them. Other estimates have put ABT membership at about 3,500 strong, with 1,000 of that number on the street. The group's members are concentrated in Texas, but have spread into prisons of neighboring states, in particular New Mexico. The gang's leadership is believed to be comprised of 5 generals, one for each region of Texas. They are collectively known as the Steering Committee or the Wheel. The generals oversee criminal activity, smuggling, drug trafficking, extortion, and other rackets in the prisons, and a variety of activity including drug running, home invasions, theft, and identity theft outside, and also order incredibly brutal sanctions against any member who breaks the gang's rules. You've heard plenty on these cats, man. I could keep reading, keep telling you about them. But they've done some bad things to people, man. And like I talked about Dinky. Dinky called shots, man, where you'd be like, wow, man, he called that shot, man? For what? They're brutal, man. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. These dudes do brutal things. Stab you in a minute. Hit you in the head with a lock. And I've seen many young kids, man, come to Big Sandy and fall under Dinky's leadership and fuck their lives off, man. We talked about John Pinky. We talked about Russell Scott Olson. Talked about them stabbing my cellie. Russ destroyed his life, man. Came in with 15 years. Ends up with 40 altogether. 15 and 25. And that's the thing that I'm talking about. I've seen these young kids, man. White kids, black kids, Spanish kids, Mexican kids. Come to prison. And they're looking for leadership. They're looking for leadership. And they find the wrong leadership. And before they know it, they're glamorizing people. They're idolizing people. Like I talked about Stevie Burke. Dudes in our car idolize this dude, man. They would do anything for him. If he said, hey, man, stab this dude, they're like, yo, I'm first. I want to do it. And I seen through that shit, man. By the grace of God, I was able to understand, hey, man, who is this dude? Think about this dude, Chad. He's a drug addict, man. He's a heroin junkie. He's going to tell you to go do something that he won't do. And when you do it, guess what? You're going to fuck your whole life off. And before long, it'll be your own people that want to destroy you, that want to stab you, that want to leave 70 holes in you for some reason. They're going to make something up. Instead of punishing that dude, remember we talked about the SAG dude earlier? Could have just beat him up, right? Did they have to go in there and stab him 70 times? This was their brother, a dude that they took pictures with, a dude that they ate with, a dude that they hung out with. He cried out for his life. And they took it, man. Following a gang leader, man. Following this dude who will tell you what to do. Then when the time comes, when you need them, they probably won't be there. But who are you? Look in the mirror, man. Who are you? Are you chasing a false dream? If you do end up in prison, what choices are you going to make? You're going to go in with a 7, 8, 9 year sentence and never leave? Do you want to be strapped to that deathbed like Ricky Fackrell? He's going to be strapped to that bed, man. It's a sad day. It's a sad day when you walk into prison a young man and you have an out date. You're going home in 9 years, 10 years. And the next thing you know, not only are you not going home, but you're going to die here. And in fact, you're going to still die when you're a young man, more than likely. How old will Ricky Fackrell be when he dies? 47, 48, 45? Going to prison 18, 19 years old? And they're going to pump that poison into his veins and he's going to die there. That's the moral of the story, man. It ain't just about who's the most dangerous, who's the most brutal. It ain't about glorifying prison. And it ain't about glorifying prison gangs. It's about telling you that that shit is real, man. That shit is raw, that you could lose your life, that you could be victimized. And nobody's going to care. Nobody. And you might be victimized by your own people. Blood on the razor wire. With respect, until tomorrow, man, we're out.